All right, welcome back, everyone, to the After the Scales podcast, episode 10. We are at our 10th episode officially, so we're excited to get into today's podcast. I'm Jacob Dove from Phenom Motorsports, along with Shaun Blight from Canadian Racing Tours and Robert Clements from Dirt Late Nation. Today we have a special guest on. She runs on the USAC trail. She's competed in the 500 Sprint Car Tour. Hailing from northern Michigan, now residing in Indiana. Thank you, TAYLOR FERNS, for being on today.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. I look forward to chatting with you guys.
So before we hop into your racing career and what you got coming up this year, we wanted to thank you for coming on, but also congratulate you for your law graduation. That's an awesome accomplishment.
Yeah, thanks so much. I obviously, you guys know I graduated yesterday from law school, so ready to be done. It's been a long, short year, or a long 4 years, and so just ready to move on to the next chapter.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely a long process. As someone myself that is in college finishing up my degree, I'm not getting my law degree like you. I'm getting a bachelor's. What kind of advice would you give to someone who's maybe in college or in school still and like balancing, the lifestyle outside of that with racing or anything in the motorsports industry?
Yeah, I think for the most part, because, I juggled a lot, like not only just like throughout my law school pursuits, but also when I was going for my master's program, just between juggling school and obviously all that comes with it as far as your classes go, the curriculum, studying for exams, also with my racing. And then I was also at one point working full-time for a law firm and running my own race team and all that comes with that. And so I think the big part of it just comes back to being organized or as organized as possible. Also just being really transparent with the people around you and that you're working with and learning to delegate a lot of tasks. I'm surrounded by a lot of really great people as far as my team goes and my crew chief and my family. And so, I was really heavily dependent on them there, especially for my last semester of law school because I was doing a clinic and I couldn't be as involved or travel as much as I could. And so, just surrounding yourself with really great people, but also learning at some point in time that you are going to mess up. And so, just kind of not learning to accept failure, but, just know, be prepared that it's going to happen and just ways of dealing and coping with that and learning from that and moving on because, you're going to make mistakes in life. Nobody's perfect. And so, I think that's just an important thing that I learned. So.
Yeah, it's definitely awesome. And you just came off a fifth place finish at the Rich Vogler Classic 100 lap race at Winchester. It's obviously a grueling race. Kind of tell our viewers about how that race went. I know you were battling, Justin Grant, Bobby Santos, who we're going to have here on our podcast on the next episode, and then some other really good guys in the Silver Crown racing.
Yeah, so we qualified third, which for me, qualifying is not my strong suit. Other than when I was running wing 410 dirt sprint cars there for a few years, I was a good qualifier doing that. But anything else I've always struggled with. So, qualifying third, especially at Winchester for me, I was happy with, but I knew that we obviously had more speed on the table. So I thought potentially contend for a victory there. But it was kind of hanging tough. The first 20 laps, I was what? I was really trying to get to second and was kind of battling for my teammate there, Dakota Armstrong, and thought maybe if I got to second, I could just ride it out and then try to battle Cody at the end. But then after the first caution, I just kind of, was hanging on there. So, battled with Grant there for the last 20 laps and, he got me there at the last second at the line. But, I was really disappointed after the race just because I felt I'm really hard on myself. I'm a strong and tough competitor. Otherwise, I wouldn't do this if I wasn't, right? But, I think there's a lot more to gain from that as far as going forward. I think, we struggled a lot last season. We worked on a lot of things during the off season that I think will put us in a good and better position to contend and run for wins throughout this year. And so I think our speed at Winchester was a strong showcasing of that, and hopefully we'll just build off that at Belleville and then hopefully run up front again at IRP.
Awesome. And I definitely want to talk to you about IRP, the big week of Indy coming up. I'm going to be there. I've never been. It's been a huge bucket list track for me, so I'm really excited to be at that race.
Yeah.
But I kind of wanted to go back to the beginning. And I guess before I continue, I got a QR code up. We've got a QR code up on the screen in the top left. You can scan that with your phone at any time. It takes you to Taylor's merchandise page. So you can buy merch when you're watching this, and you'll be all decked out and ready for Indy next week. So we were talking about your graduation with law school, and you've obviously been racing since you were a little kid. At what point did those two interests kind of merge, or at what point did you consider or think about getting into law school while you're racing?
So there was actually a point there in my career for like 3 or 4 years I wasn't racing. And that's when I was going for my bachelor's degree at Grand Valley State University in Grand Rapids. And so, that was a really tough time for me personally, not racing. Up until that point, I'd been racing. Like racing was a large part of my life for about 15, 16 years up until that point. And so to not be involved in racing at all was really hard for me to kind of cope with. But I just kind of spent all my extra time and pursuits and endeavors and put that into my academics, and graduated with honors and things of that nature. But it was at Grand Valley where I really fell in love with business law. And, I kind of, when I sat down to take the LSAT for the first time, it was like a light bulb went off that I was like, oh, I could be a motorsports attorney and, still be involved in racing, but, kind of do like contract work or business development or kind of like driver representation or things of that nature. And so, from there on out, I was like set on going to law school. And then after I graduated from my undergraduate university, I started working at a law firm while simultaneously getting back into racing. So that's kind of where I started juggling everything. My passion for racing never left. But then when I started racing again, I realized, how much I loved it and how much I had missed it throughout that time. And so, that's kind of throughout that period of time was when I realized, I could probably mix like my number one passion of motorsports with like my business curriculum and development that I had previously had, while also kind of bringing in the law into that as well.
And so you're from Michigan, not too far from me in Southern Ontario. And that area around Michigan is a real hotbed for racing. There's some great tracks around there, including Toledo, which is kind of northern Ohio. It's a great track there too. Mm-hmm. What got you interested in racing? Was it a family thing? And where did you kind of start racing as a kid?
Yeah, so I definitely grew up in a motorsports family. My two uncles on my maternal side raced late models and ARCA throughout the 80s and early 90s. And so that was before I was born. But obviously growing up, and my mom had a large family, we always kind of celebrated the Daytona 500s like they were Super Bowls in our family. And so, was just always around it until I started racing when I was 6 years old in quarter midgets. And so, from there, that's when the love affair began, if you will. And so, just kind of went up the ranks from there. But definitely grateful to come from the family that I did, to be introduced to motorsports. I think if it wasn't kind of having that familial background, who knows what I'd be doing. But yeah, it's definitely been a family sport for the most part up until, when I was in my early teens. My dad and I kind of started traveling on our own and going to a lot of the races because my schedule was just so crazy. But, just lucky to have the support of my family and to, still be doing this 22 years later.
And usually before we come on the podcast, we like to reach out on our social medias and see if anyone has any questions for our guests. So Bert, would you like to bring up the question that I believe someone had for Taylor?
Yeah, so one of our viewers wanted to ask, they wanted to ask you about running the Indy NXT car on ovals this year, and if the experience you have in a Silver Crown car at Gateway is any help for that race.
Yeah, so this is something I've been thinking about a lot, because I obviously don't have a Formula car background. I've raced a lot of other race cars, but not specifically a Formula type car, other than my involvement with Skip Barber Racing School. So, I've been kind of thinking, the Indy Next cars, they're obviously rear engine cars, so more the weight is focused behind the driver instead of in front of the driver, like some of my open wheel cars, like my sprint car is, or even my Silver Crown car. But I think some of my experience, like racing the wing dirt sprint cars, as far as like with the wings and how the air and the aerodynamics affect from the wings, and like driving behind a car, and like when you enter into the corner, kind of like stepping out so you can still get the air down on the wing. I think after talking with some of the engineers at Able Motorsports, who I'm racing for, I kind of pulled some similarities from that, just so I can already kind of like forecast like what that might feel like if I'm behind a driver and I pull out. But also the fact that, I mentioned that these are rear engine cars, and having all that weight behind me, I'm kind of like comparing it to the beginning of a Silver Crown race when we run like 100 miles and, we have 500 pounds of fuel behind us, right? So the cars are kind of lazier and obviously at the same time more sensitive as far as if you were to overdrive the corners, because you have so much weight behind you. So with the weight travel and the balance and the things of that nature. So I've been trying to pull bits from all the different cars that I've raced to see how and if it might apply. But obviously we won't know until my first test and my first race. But I'm doing everything I can behind the scenes to be as prepared as I can. Like working out with Pit Fit, or like some of the stuff that I did with Skip Barber Racing School, or working out with the engineers and watching a lot of film and video. And so, you know, um, yeah, just trying to be as prepared as I can be.
So you mentioned that as a young kid, you were watching a lot of, Daytona 500s and NASCAR stuff, and now you're creeping closer and closer to IndyCar. Um, was that a kind of a goal that you set out from the start, or was that something like once you started racing, you just kind of took a liking to the open wheel side?
So that's a good question. So I will say when I was younger, in my early teens, I became connected with Lynn St. James, who since I was 13 has been a huge influence and mentor on my life. But she used to always say, when she would take me around to the tracks and introduce me to all these people, they would all ask me what I wanted to do, like what I aspired to race in, or what series or what car and things of that nature. And I always just said, my response was, I just wanted to race. I didn't care if it was NASCAR or IndyCar or the World of Outlaws or whatever. Like I'm just obsessed with racing, and that's just what I wanted to do. And so Lynn would get on my case and she would say, "Oh, you sound like you're floating in the wind. Like you need to pick something." And so, obviously coming from the stock car background that my family did, growing up watching NASCAR, I had kind of decided when I was 15, 16 that that's what I wanted to do. And so I started transitioning from racing the open wheel stuff and racing late models. And then I did some ARCA races with Venturinis, like back in 2013. And then, still went back wing sprint car racing naturally. But then, after I took some of that time off from racing, went and got my degrees and things of that nature. And when I came back, I was like, you know what, maybe I'll try something different. Maybe we'll try going the IndyCar route and kind of maybe bring back some of the roots of, when some of the, like the Bettenhausens, the Andrettis, the Unzers, how they all came from sprint car, Silver Crown, USAC racing, and, kind of went the IndyCar route. And so, it's something Brian Clausen did, not too long ago. Sarah Fisher did it. There's been a handful of others the past few years that, have tried the transition. And so, I just feel like that it's the right thing for me right now.
I'd like to follow up on that because you mentioned Lynn St. James, and like when I was a kid, there was her and there was maybe Shauna Robinson on the NASCAR side. And now you look at, you watch Flow Racing any night, any race, and you've got, a lot more women in motorsports. So I was going to maybe ask you like the effect that she's had on not only yourself, but, all the women drivers that have come after her. And because I think I saw you went to, she had a development program as well. So maybe talk about that experience.
Yeah, so when I was first actually introduced to Lynn, it was I was 13. I attended her Women in the Winner's Circle Academy out in Phoenix. And it was kind of like a weekend school, if you will, where there was like about maybe 15-ish girls that she had kind of recruited, or girls that had applied to kind of go to the phase one of the academy. And it was out at Athletes Performance in Phoenix. And I remember that, they over like a 3 to 4 day period, they were like your fitness, your nutrition, your mental focus, and your mental fitness and things of that nature. Really honed in on a lot of the off things that would set you up off track in order to improve your ability to have a sustainable career on track, right? The networking, the media interviews, the things of that, everything that is important off the track to keep you racing. And so, me being young, early on in my teenage years, like that was instrumental throughout my development as I went on. And so, I think with Lynn, as far as, obviously she was super accomplished and prominent as far as what she did on the track for females in racing. But for me, I think, and also her personal effect on my life has been a lot of what she did off the track, as far as like being a mentor to me, taking me to the tracks, introducing me to a lot of really influential people in the industry. And she's done that, for the past 15 years that I've known her. And so I think it's like her influence on me has been more to show like you can have an influence on somebody more so, not just aside from what you're doing on the track and being super successful on the track, because that is super important. And that's what I really want to pride myself in, is how I perform on track, winning races, running up front, like contending with some of the best racers, but also like how I handle myself off the track and a lot of my off track endeavors, like, showing I can, still race and go to school and get an education. And, basically I run my own team. And so that's my business, and, just juggling a lot of different things to hopefully inspire others that, you can still follow your passion and kind of juggle all these other things, because, I kind of have to do that to still race. And remain competitive and, run up front. And, I think right now I'm just in a really good space to kind of like, because I did everything right off the track, that it puts me in a really good position, to run with some of the best drivers on the track.
And you mentioned a lot of your off-track activity. Obviously, on track, you've had a lot of success. You've raced a lot of different open-wheel race cars. You're also the highest finishing female in the USAC Silver Crown history. So you're kind of checking off some more boxes as far as your goals. You also mentioned about how important running your race car team and your business, and how important partners are in racing, getting up and down the road. It's obviously an expensive sport. Kind of talk about all the people that support you. Obviously, you have some big ones like Mobile One. They have a pretty cool paint scheme with your car with the cool chrome gold on there, and some of the other different ways to market your partners. You have Bradford Allen, 1-800-CALL-SAM, FK Roddins. Just tell our viewers about all the people that kind of help support you.
Yeah, so obviously it's super important. Like, I would not be able to do this if it wasn't with the help and support and the resources from a lot of my partners, and some in more capacity than others. But, I think it's important regardless of how much somebody is giving you or what they're giving you, like it's still helping you in some way. And so, if it wasn't for, Bradford Allen, I couldn't afford what I'm doing right now by any means. But, it also helps like with Mobile One, as far as like the oil that they give me, that saves me a big expense, or, like FK rod ends and, the rod ends that they send me, or Simpson Race products, and, the safety equipment and the discounts that they give me in that regard. So, it all adds up, like as large or menial it may be, to help keep me going, because, anything and everything makes a difference in this industry. Life isn't cheap anymore, but neither is racing. And so, it all kind of compounds to help keep me on the track. And, I think I really set myself up well for the things that I did off the track to market myself, whether it's, writing a column for Speed Sport, or, sending out my newsletter that I have, and like anything that I can do to add on to help market my partners, to give them kind of like that extra influence on the industry or spread their name, I think is also kind of, it's not just like the hardest part is getting the partners, but then also making sure that you can sustain them and keep them on. And so, that's something that I pride myself with, and, something that I'm always continuing to work on. But it's definitely a full-time job, and something that I haven't perfected, but we're getting there.
All right, let's talk about 2024. So you got the week of Indy next week. You mentioned you got another race before the Hoosier 100. Talk about how crazy busy the next couple of weeks are for you.
Yeah, no, so actually it all started basically yesterday, really. As soon as after I graduated, I drove back from Detroit back to Indy this morning, and, just getting ready for Belleville this weekend. But it's like even now before Belleville, we're already preparing for IRP, because as soon as we get back from Belleville on Sunday, we'll go test IRP at some point early in the week, and then we race Carb Night. To me, it's still Carb Night, but obviously they rebranded it the Hoosier 100 on Friday. But then at the same point in time, my teammates are running the little 500. So, that's a big thing that goes on throughout that whole week. And then also I'm doing a lot of stuff as far as like activation with some sponsors and stuff for the Indy 500. I might be spotting still for my teammate at the little 500. So, there's so much going on. I know last year I definitely spread myself really thin. So, we're going to try to be mindful of that this year to not repeat, have history repeat itself. But yeah, so much going on. And then after that, there's the Detroit GP. So even though I'm not racing, I'm still going home and doing a lot of stuff with partners and things of that nature, back home in Detroit, for that race that weekend. And so, basically like this week, it's kind of starts to tumbleweed as far as like the rest of the season goes.
And what I know you've got your goal is obviously to win a race. Just talk about your goals for the rest of the season, just in general, because you got your Silver Crown, you got the IndyCar NXT, which is still Indy Lights for me. I still call it that, so I got to get used to that. But yes, just talk about your racing goals here going ahead in the rest of the year.
Yeah, so for me, definitely, we've podiumed in the USAC Silver Crown stuff before, but I definitely want to continue. Obviously, the more consistent we are with running up front, the wins are going to come naturally, right? And I feel like we've shown the speed that we can run up front, we can finish up front. Now it's just kind of, being consistent with that and just sealing the deal. I really feel like once we win our first one, it's just going to like spiral and we'll just start clicking more and more off. But that's definitely the goal. Like I'm not one to celebrate podiums. I want to celebrate wins. I've been winning sprint car midget races since I was 14, but that Silver Crown win is eluding me. But then also, my sprint car is probably one of my favorite cars to race, and we've kind of been in a drought here the past few years. But I think, we've shown a lot of speed and potential in that regard to where I know we can get the job done. We just got to put it all together. So, we're getting there. And I always say Rome wasn't built in a day, but we're going to try. But then as far as the Indy next stuff goes, I definitely hold high expectations for myself. And also the people that I work with. And so, I feel like, Abel has already shown in the past that they can run up front, but especially with how well Jacob is running so far this season, that they can win races. And so, I'm really looking forward to working with those guys more. I already feel like I've clicked with the team really well, and just kind of, being a sponge and, picking their brains, coming prepared and asking questions, going into the shop. And so, no one really knows fully what this transition will be like for me. But we're just going to try to be as prepared as possible. But, I really wouldn't be surprised if we run up front right off the bat. But I think it just depends on how well my transition is and how well I can adapt to these cars. Personally, I hold a lot of confidence in myself where I don't feel like I'm going to have a problem. But I don't want to be ignorant or naive. And so I'm going to go into it with a level head, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add on. Obviously, you have guys like Kyle Larson who run both dirt and asphalt. And I wanted to ask you, how does your dirt experience help your ability in the asphalt world?
I think it helps tremendously, as far as like car control goes. And, I think just a lot of people that I've worked with, even when I was at Skip Barber, some of the little techniques that they'll have us do off the track on like the skid pads and stuff like that. Like I've always received a ton of compliments as far as like how good my car control is. And I don't think I would have that if it wasn't for racing dirt since I was like 8 years old. And so, like I'm not afraid to drive a loose car. I actually prefer to drive a loose car over a tight car. And so I think I would attribute that to my dirt experience. So I'm not afraid if a car kind of like kicks out a little bit, I know I can handle it and drive out of it. And so, I think if you have a driver that's raced both dirt and pavement and it has shown success in both regards, like I think that's actually preferred than just having one driver and like has like a focus on one surface over the other. And so I think, the more variety, the better. The more exposure, the better. And I think it just makes you a more well-rounded driver.
So really want to thank you for your time, Taylor. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to go say hi to you in the pits next week. I can't wait for that race at IRP. Before we let you go, we've got a game show that we like to do at the end of every podcast called Rapid Fire with Victory Fuel. We fire off 10 just random questions. Just answer first thing that comes to your head. People watching, just put Dirt Lake Nation into your purchase at Victory Fuel for 10% off. And Jacob, take it away.
Yeah, so our first question is, outside of your family, who is your racing hero?
Outside of my family, I would say Tony Stewart.
Yeah, definitely one of my favorites for sure too. And what is the best racetrack food in your opinion?
A cheeseburger.
Have any particular racetrack that has the best cheeseburger?
Ooh. No, I will say I tried like sampling. I was down for Florida Speed Weeks going to all the wing sprint car races this past February. So each track we went to, I was sampling all the cheeseburgers, but I don't think any of them quite had the best one. So still on the lookout for that. Eldora's food is not bad though.
What is your favorite racetrack to race at?
Ooh. Do I have to pick one? Can I pick one pavement and one dirt track?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, so this one is a tough one for me, but favorite pavement track at the moment, I'd probably say is IRP or ORP, however you want to refer to it as. My favorite dirt track, I'd say, you can't go Kokomo Speedway.
Yeah, Kokomo is a great track too. They just raced the high limit sprints there last night. So this one's kind of a hot debate, but obviously Silver Crown cars have a unique starter. But should all sprint cars have starters? Yes or no?
Just for like nostalgia and history purposes, I'm just so used to them pushing us off. For me, a sprint car wouldn't be the same without having to push us off. So no.
That's the right answer.
Yeah.
What's your pet peeve while driving your daily street car?
Oh my gosh. I just have to pick one. Drivers who are driving below the speed limit in the fast lane.
Oh my God, that's mine.
Cringe. That's the worst.
And since you started law school, have you ever yelled objection during an argument with a driver?
Not yet, but stay tuned.
Yeah, that was kind of a funny question. But what was your favorite singer or band that you're listening to right now?
Ooh. I would just say in general, like I'm a big Linkin Park fan. I also really love Lainey Wilson. I listen to everything, but I would say off the top of my head, those are my two. And
you spent a lot of time in Indy. What is the best place to eat at in Indianapolis?
Ooh, Tony's Steakhouse downtown, for sure.
Definitely a popular choice. And then this one's kind of unique, but there's obviously a lot of really good drivers that you race against. But you're side by side coming to the line for your first win. Who is the one driver that you want to beat the most?
Cody Swanson.
No hesitation.
I like Cody, but he's the one to beat right now.
Yeah, for sure.
That's for sure. And then last but not least, do you have a racing nickname? Because obviously, a sprint car driver, Parker Price Miller, he's the law firm. So do you have a unique nickname?
I don't think so. You know, I heard somebody once call me, I think, Iron Girl. Somebody recently kind of backed that up with like something along the lines of like a warrior. I don't know, warrior something. I don't know. I wouldn't say that I have one, but I'm sure I've heard a variety of different things over the years.
I think the
Nothing that's
prosecutor
stuck.
would be a good one. We got the law firm, but the prosecutor.
I don't know. I'm not a big fan of prosecutors. I don't reasons.
All right.
Well, we wanted to conclude the show by thanking Taylor again for being on today. Obviously, stay tuned for all of her races coming up on her schedule. You can catch her USAC tour on Flow Racing or watching her in person. Make sure to check out all her merchandise at the QR code above. Get swagged out and hats or shirts that she has. Yeah, thanks again, Taylor, for being on today. And for all our viewers, make sure to like and subscribe to our After the Scales podcast channel. And stay tuned for our...
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So thanks again to Taylor for being on our podcast today. And our next segment is the Green, White, Checkered. I'm going to start us off with the green flag. Last night, there was the High Limit Sprint Car Series, visited Kokomo Speedway, one of the most exciting dirt tracks on the schedule. Obviously creates a lot of really good racing, usually very popular with the USAC non-wing sprint cars and midgets, but a very special track for us, with one of our heroes, Brian Clausen, growing up there and winning a lot of races there and having Victory Lane, in tribute to him. And it was definitely a chaotic night of racing. The lane racing number 4 sprint car was going for transfer for the last transfer spot in the heat race, and he ended up hitting the wall out of turn 4 and flipping really hard. But luckily he was okay, but it was a gnarly ride. The heat races were really competitive. The dash redraw with the spin wheel is always exciting to see where the starts are going to be. And then the dice roll winner was Tyler Courtney. So he did end up pulling off the victory last night. There was a lot of cautions in the beginning, but once the guys got going and settled in, the track took a lot of rubber, but still good racing overall. Buddy Kofoid was pounding the wall and the cushion off of turn 2, and then Spencer Baston came out of nowhere from 12th place and finished second. So great job to Spencer. We're big fans of him with Team True Timber. And then obviously Tyler Courtney getting the win for Team NOS and Cost Marshall Racing. So that was definitely awesome. So definitely stay tuned for Thursday and Friday. They got more high limit sprint cars coming up. And then, we'll jump over to Bert for the white flag.
Yeah, so we can just kind of go over this last weekend for the Lucas Oil. We had a Mega Illinois doubleheader, Farmer City and Fairbury. Farmer City was I didn't watch any of them, but I do know that Bab had something that happened to him, and Ricky Thornton Jr. came from 8th for his 3rd straight Lucas Oil win. So that's congratulations to him at Farmer City. And then at Fairbury, finally, one of the better drivers in the field, very humble, is also trying to make the championship 4. Devin Moran took home $30,000 at Fairbury with Lucas Oil. He regained the lead from Jason Fager on lap 45 and went on to win the spring shootout. But currently your championship 4 is Ricky Thornton Jr., Jonathan Davenport, Devin Moran, and Mike Marlar, with Hudson O'Neill and Tim McCready creeping in the 5th and 6th spot. So it should be a good one. So it'd definitely be something you want to stay tuned with in the coming weeks.
Yeah, definitely stay tuned for that. And you can check all that out on Flow Racing. And then next up, we have our checkered flag with Shaun.
All right, so all of my racing plans got ruined by Mother Nature last weekend. I was supposed to go to Lernerville and Sharon, and both got canceled. So going to try that again coming up. But wanted to pass along, since Jacob was talking about Kokomo, that our previous guest, Jacob Dykstra, has a midget deal that he's going to be running starting at Atomic on May 24th and 25th, I believe are the dates, Friday, Saturday. So he's going to be running that with the World of Outlaw sprint cars, kind of a double header there. And then Indiana Speed Week in June, he's going to be running Kokomo and Lawrenceburg and a few tracks up that area. So congrats to him. That'll be exciting. So stay tuned for that.
So thank you, everyone, for tuning in today to our After the Scales podcast. And we appreciate everyone for listening or watching. And make sure to stay tuned for episode 11 next up with Bobby Santos III. Should be a good one.